Yes, yes. Thank you for joining us tonight on TRP Live, a show that was created by the Reclamation Project to have candid discussions on real issues that impact people. I'm your host, Stan Mackey. For tonight's broadcast, we have our fearsome foursome who are back once again. Dr. Dent, Terrence Clark, Paul Stevenson. Good evening, my brothers.
Good
Welcome.
evening.
What's up?
How you doing?
How y'all doing?
All
All
right.
right, all
Good.
right.
Good, man. Y'all looking good, but y'all don't sound too excited. Come on now. I see my purple and gold being represented.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes, sir. Yes,
I
sir.
got my motherland brocade been yes in all of its
Yeah.
glory. Come on, I got cherry blossoms in the back, feeling a little like Christmas. It's beginning to That's
All
what's
right.
up.
Ah.
Come on, come on. Man, it's good to see you guys again, and we are back once more to discuss some important stuff. Tonight's topic is faith of a mustard seed. Faith the size of a mustard seed. How do you get it? Is the question that we're going to ask tonight. But first, I want to ask each of you, what does faith the size of a mustard seed mean to you? Come on, whoever wants to take the mic first.
I
What does
always
faith the
take the
size of
mic
a mustard
first,
seed
so
mean to
I'm
you?
gonna
Come
let
on.
somebody else take the mic first this week.
All right, we're in the sharing mood today.
Man.
Come
He trying to
Sharing
lubricate that
spirit.
voice. That's what that's about.
on, come on, come on.
Come on, Terrence. What you got, bro?
Come on now, don't
You
everybody.
know, honestly, for me, man, it's when you say faith the size of a mustard seed, I always think about the text, referring to, the ability to move mountains. As a kid, that always, stuck out in my mind. I'm looking around, growing up in the Bay Area, like, man, if I had faith in God enough, I could literally move that mountain, right? So
Mm-hmm.
then here you come along into your adulthood, and what I actually come to find for myself is that ever so elusive faith enough to move that mountain was not something that I could go out and find for myself, but it was actually a gift that was given to me, right?
Mm.
And so I've heard it said that you can't appreciate up until you've been down. And so it was in my down point that I really learned to understand what it was like to truly have faith, to understand that there's no other way out of this situation. Not my pastor, not my wife, not my friends, not my mother, no one. The only way out of this situation is God, and I had to firmly, plant my feet in that, right? And
Right,
ever
right.
since then, that's just been a holy matrimony, so to speak. I pass the
Okay,
baton. Man,
okay,
that's so
come on,
beautiful,
come
my
on.
brother. I love the mustard seed concept because it gives me the right and the opportunity, because it's something that's tangible, something that is measurable, and it's something that I can benefit from.
Mm.
And yes, I've had some mountains and some valleys in my life, and God sometimes make it relatable to me. So I thank God for something so small, and I have something to look forward to. And if God can do it for me, sure enough, He can do it for you. I
Come
pass.
on. All right.
When
Speak
we
on it.
talk about when we talk about faith being the size of a mustard seed, I equate that mustard seed to things that are happening in your life that requires a certain amount of faith in order to get through. Sometimes
Mhm.
I'll give you a little story about when I did my first 5K. I was 273 pounds. I had not gotten off the couch in years. And
Mm.
so I was really afraid that I was going to embarrass myself, really. I was really afraid that I was going to embarrass myself by trying to do a 5K, 3 miles. And,
Mhm.
you know, we prayed about it, and I actually did no prep for this thing. So I was really in no position to say that I did anything on my own. You know what I'm saying? That was really in no position to be able to say that. And so I had prayed on this thing, man, that and the prayer was so that I wouldn't be embarrassed. How about that?
Yeah.
It wasn't that I would make this thing. It was that I wouldn't embarrass myself. And, you know, after I got done with that, my first 5K, that was a hot chocolate run in San Francisco. Right. Anyway, after I got done with that thing, man, I had so much energy. I felt like I could do it again. And so, you know, I was exercising faith by doing it because in my heart, I didn't want to do it because why? If I don't do it, then I don't embarrass myself.
Yeah,
no one knows if I can do it or if I can't do it. But if I don't do it, people are still at the same point. They don't know if I can or if I can't. You know what I'm saying? But you know what? I went ahead and did it. And after I got done, man, my strength or my faith was increased because of that mountain that was moved out of the way based upon the fact that I used faith in order to be able to get me through. And so that's how I look at the whole moving the mountain, the size of a mustard seed, moving the mountain, that there are things that are in our lives, man, that we can't just say that it was because of any prep or anything that we did that we are able to accomplish the task or anything like that. It was because of the fact that we took what little bit of faith that we had in God. Come on, because it was a little bit of faith that I had. I was really more afraid of the embarrassment than I was of being successful. And so that's how I equated it right then. So I passed the baton.
Okay, so you know what? Before I share what faith means to me, or what the faith the size of a mustard seed means to me, let's ask, because I have a story that I think will amaze you. It's not a story about me, but it's a story that I'm going to share that I believe will amaze you and those of you who are listening. But let me ask this question first. What does the Bible say about faith? What is faith? So let's help define what it is. What is it? You know, what's meant by it when the Bible uses it. So for those who are listening, that there is no mistake.
So the Bible says faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. You just don't see it yet, but you have enough faith to move forward. I have a quick faith story. I have enough faith every day to be disobedient and can still hear that still small voice. And that's God telling me to do what he's asking me to do. And when I do it, I have faith to believe. And sometimes I can see the evidence of what God has asked me to do. This faith thing, it can be tricky sometimes. And sometimes you can be on the mountain on your faith and you can almost borderline get cocky with it. And then God says, it's time for a valley experience. Then you go back down. You're like, ooh, I don't have as much faith. So faith is something that we all need on this journey, trying to get to our destination. I'll pass the baton.
I like that. So I want somebody else, if you would, in your own words, share with the listeners, the viewers, what faith is according to the Bible. So we just read it. In fact, here, let me put it back on screen again. So Hebrews 11 says that now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So in case somebody is not completely clear on that, would Terrence, you and Paul also just mind sharing in your own words, what does that mean? Give some more clarity, some more depth.
I didn't understand, Mac. Did you want to give more clarity as far as the Bible is concerned, or did you want us to give a story that we might have of our own to show this whole thing about faith?
Well, you can share a story also, if you will, if that helps to illustrate your point. But I wanted you, in your own words, just take that scripture that we just read and rephrase it, restate it the way you would say it. So just pretend that someone is saying, hey, I just read that, but I'm still not quite sure. Can you restate that again? So again, because what we're doing here now, we're trying to define what faith is. So we all shared, first of all, what faith is, the size of a mustard seed to us. What does that mean to us? Incorporating our experience. And so now what we just did was we brought in what the Bible defines, a little bit more of a denotative, and more of a dictionary type definition of what faith is. So I was wondering if you would share, Terrence. I see your hand, so I'll let you go first, Paul, while you think about that. Restate.
Okay. Stan, God wants us to try our best to do what we can for ourselves on our own, right? He doesn't really want us coming to him for something that we can do ourselves. But at the same time, there's this hypothetical red button that would be God in my mind. And so when all else fails, I press that red button and I exercise my faith, right? I don't call you up. I don't call Chris up. I don't call Paul up. I press that red button and I get down on my knees and I pray to God in faith about whatever said issue is, right? And so to me, that's just really what it is, not relying on anyone or anything else but the power of God, and having faith that not only will he hear what I'm praying to him about, whatever the issue may be, but also that he will answer that prayer. I pass the baton.
Got it.
I think that faith is one of those things where you can't take the credit. A lot of people will try to say that, if it's something like Terrence said, if it's something that you can do basically on your own and other people can do it, then how does God get the glory? All right. So in order for faith to be able to be exercised, it's going to have to be something where only God can get the glory. You might be used in some form or fashion, but you also understand that it wasn't because of you that you were able to do some phenomenal feat. And I'll go back to a story in the Bible where, Moses led the children out of Israel and they come to the edge of the Red Sea. Moses can't take credit for that. You know what I'm saying? Moses can't take credit for the parting of the sea. That's something that only that God gets the glory for. All right. When we hear stories in the Bible about people being raised from the dead, all right, although the vehicle might have been human hands or a human voice, but the reality of the situation is that it's God that's doing it. So God is getting that glory. So Elijah can't boast, Moses can't boast, Joshua can't boast. Who were we talking about the other day? Gideon can't boast. None of these guys can boast. They have to give glory to God. And we'll see as we go further what happens when these guys do decide to boast on their own. But I'll pass the baton.
Come on, Doc.
Oh man, I'm starting to feel good now.
Warming up. Your engine's warmed up now.
Paul is a part-time preacher, and I like it when Paul gets excited. He gets me excited because it's and that laugh is so contagious. But here's an example where we are right now in 2020. All of us are in a boat, in our boat, but only one man had enough faith to get out of the boat. And he began to move and walk on water, never done before. And then he started doing what all of us do, start looking around, hey, hey, and he began to sink. So faith, he had enough. The other guy said, I'm spiritual enough. I love Jesus enough, but it wasn't enough for you to get out the boat. So we represent the one man to get out of the boat, try something new, try something different. We are now even as we speak, we're walking on water. So if we can do it, you can do it, but keep your eyes on the prize, which is Jesus, because if you don't, you will sink. I pass the baton.
All right, I like that. Come on, Doc. Let me just summarize that. So, Doc, that was basically keep your eyes on Jesus. Is the summary
Yes.
of your? All right, all
Stay
right.
focused. Yes, yes. Focus on the prize.
Come on, Terrence.
So I'm liking what I'm hearing, and first of all, I'd like to say when we talk about this thing called faith, I know we're talking about faith the size of a mustard seed, but when we're talking about this thing called faith, there's no one formula in terms of how to go about it. But the one constant that I'm hearing from everybody that's speaking, including myself, is that of relationship. Right? One thing about faith is that it's going to foster relationship with our Lord and Savior, with the King of Kings. And I think that's just really what the most, at its core essence, that's the most important thing about it all. The more of a relationship that you go after with Christ, the more faith will develop in you, because you'll begin to see not necessarily the works that he's performing in another person, but the works that he performs in you. You'll begin to see yourself put down that cigarette. You'll begin to see yourself put down the alcohol, or whatever your vice might be. It might be finances. It could be a myriad of things, but whatever it may be, you're going to see that change, that transformation begin in your life, and it's going to cause you, I would like to believe, to trust in him even more. That's what we're talking about faith. I pass the baton.
Okay, all right. So faith develops with the growth of your relationship. Is that how you kind of would summarize that? All right. So I'll go ahead and share mine. So let me share first let me state what faith means to me. Faith was something that when I finally understood it, it went like this. If I could develop a faith like that mustard seed, and I know Paul and Chris will know, we were in a call earlier this week. We were talking about, what was meant by that. I won't go too deep into that tonight. But there was more to the mustard seed than just the size of it. But one should consider what a mustard seed does once it's been planted, once it's been sown, what you reap. And that's that mustard plant. The mustard plant, which is a very elaborate, a very large, unmistakable, you just can't miss it type of herb. So big is it, it's technically a plant, I believe, but it gets so large that it's sometimes akined as to a tree. And from that small mustard seed, if anyone's ever seen it, well, it was on the image for tonight's broadcast. If you've ever seen a mustard seed, it's very small, but what it grows into is something very large and elaborate. So when I thought about how my faith could transform into something like that and have such a large impact as that, I thought, wow, that's amazing. If I can get that, if I can be successful at achieving the faith the way Jesus described it in the Bible, that would be awesome. And so I want to share this story, and then I'm gonna let you guys chime in. So I was doing some reading. For a long time, it puzzled me. This the mustard seed faith, and how if you had faith like it, or if you will, the size of it, that you could tell a mulberry tree to get up and move and it would, or you could tell a mountain to get up and move. I thought to myself, that's just incredible. I'm not sure. I mean, honestly, well, I want to believe it, but honestly, it was just hard for me to believe that was ever achievable. I just didn't think that could happen. At least not in my lifetime. I believe Jesus could do it, perhaps one of the disciples, but I never thought that in modern times, or post the disciples, post Jesus in Earth's history, that would be done. Would you believe that there is an account of that happening? Yes, there is. I'm going to share it with you. Marco Polo is his name. Everybody familiar with Marco Polo?
Right.
The famous traveler, writer, journaled all these adventures, these places he went to. Well, there was a place I don't remember the writing, but if anyone wants to know, I'll post it in the thread later, because it's been a while since I've read it. But in one of the books on Marco Polo's journals, one of his journeys, he writes about an encounter. Okay, he came to this town and he stayed for a couple of days to see what was going on. That's just what he did. And then he wrote about it, wrote about the people, wrote about their culture, wrote about what they did, what was going on. And when he got to this place, there was a dilemma that was taking place. Okay, to make us long story short, there was one administration in charge, and that administration that was in charge of that city was going to kill the Christians, and on condition he would allow them to live, and that was if they would cause a mountain to move. And so he gave them time. So the Christian representative said, hey, you know what? Well, we need time. They were fearing for their lives. They're like, what is this? We know this story. We know the story of the parable or that Jesus told, but you're asking us to do this? I mean, we're Christians, but we're not that kind of Christian. And so they said, we need time. And so everyone got together. This is Marco Polo writing this. Okay, you can find this. You can Google this. And so the story is told that they were all discussing. They met, the people of the town, the Christians met in this town. They said, we need to do something. We're going to all die. Is there anyone who is qualified to lead us and to give us instruction on what we need to do? We know we need to pray, but is there anyone who will lead out? And one person, as the story is told, stood up and said, hey, I know someone a man who lives righteously, and I think he's the candidate for us to go to. He was a cobbler. He was a one-eyed cobbler. The story is told. Not a person who makes pies, but a person who takes care of shoes.
Yeah.
Right. And he had one eye. This is the story of the one-eyed cobbler. They went to the one-eyed cobbler. They presented the dilemma. And he said, well, hey, wait. His first response was, I don't know. I'm not qualified to do this. But then he went home and he prayed. He gave it thought. And he said, okay, well, let's do this. He gave them some instructions that all revolved around prayer, most certainly. But he stood up, he took his position, and he said, you know what? If God can deliver us, and we're going to trust that he will. And so on Showcase Showdown, on the deadline, we're going to go, we're going to believe, and this is what we're going to do. And they did this. They went on that day. And would you believe? Yes, if you've ever wondered whether this was just a marvelous promise that was made, but had never happened in Earth's history, this is the story that says that, yes, it did, in fact, happen. And that is on Showcase Showdown. Everyone was there. The Christians were lined up. They were going to be killed. After that, after they had their opportunity, and when the person who was in charge said, hey, all right, what is your pleasure? What are you guys going to do? They prayed, and all of a sudden, the ground began to shake. And the mountain that he pointed to moved from its position and created a space for them to walk through.
Wow.
So now when I read that, listen, bro, I was up on my feet. I was like, can you believe this? Man.
Come on now.
Hallelujah to the highest. Are you kidding me? The mountain moved. It actually moved. God's word actually did not return void. This story is chronicled in the writings of Marco Polo, who was not a Christian, by the way, not by any all intents and purposes. He was not a Christian, so there's no reason to believe that he was biased and he wrote this story to embellish the the writings of Matthew. Nah, but he wrote about what he had reported, what had been reported to him. So when I heard this, my faith increased, because now the story that I had first esteemed as perhaps incredible for someone like me and you to ever realize or see come to fruition, had actually happened more than 1,000 years after Jesus walked the earth. What say ye, my brothers? So what is that? So what does faith, the size of a mustard seed, mean to me? That means that there is hope for you to have that. And we have a more modern day example of that having taken place in Earth's history. And if the one-eyed cobbler could have it, so can you. The only thing we need to do is get to that point. And that brings me to my next question. How do we get faith like that? Or how do we at least build to that? Come on, brother.
Yeah, I think that Terrence was probably the one that spoke to that, where he said that, it's this relationship that's built. And it's a relationship that's built upon faith. I'll give you an example. Stan, if you and I didn't know each other at all, and we just happened to be a couple of guys that work together, but, each time you needed my help, I would come and help you. Your car breaks down. You're like, hey, man, I need a ride to work. You think you can pick me up? Hey, I got you. And I do it cheerfully. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I got you. And you may think to yourself that, you know what, man, I can't keep asking this guy. But if I come to you and I take you off the hook by saying, listen, if you ever need a ride, just give me a holler and I'll come and pick you up. We are building a faith relationship. The same thing happens when we build this faith relationship with God. We depend on God. All right. So God is always going to be faithful on his end. But can we be faithful on our end? And so, and as we come into this relationship, this faith relationship, the more that God can begin to depend on us, then the bonds become even stronger. So I'm depending on God. God is depending on me to be faithful, right? It's not because that I have supernatural powers or anything like that, but can he use me? Yeah. Will I answer the call each time that he calls on me? Will I do what he says? Will I obey his will? I think there was something that you and Chris had told me a long time, well, not long time ago, but a year or so ago, where you guys had explained to me the meaning of obedience is better than sacrifice. Man, my whole world changed after you guys explained that, man, that obedience was better than sacrifice. And so if I'm obedient to God's will, then the faith relationship begins to grow a stronger bond. And so when that happens right there, because Jesus said that greater things than these will you and I be able to do. But we gotta have faith. We gotta have faith. And how do you get that relationship? I mean, how do you get that faith? It comes from the relationship that you have. Like I said, God is always going to be faithful on his end. We just have to be faithful on our end. And then we will build that relationship that's needed in order to be able to do those things in order to be used by God to do those things that God can be glorified.
Come on, dog.
That's my brother. I'm about to keep building that cake. You're making that cake. So if you allow me to put another layer on top, let's look at the first cousin to faith.
Come on.
So the first cousin to faith is trust. So as Terrence said, we're building this relationship. We have faith. So let's go through a relationship. I'll use myself as an example. I'm dating this young lady. I have faith to believe that she'll go out on the first date. She says yes.
enough right there to get
And
you
then
going.
we go through a year or so, and I said, hey, I want her to be, the first and only lady. So it takes faith for you to get the ring, faith for you to pick a date, and it's faith because you don't know if she's gonna say yes or not. So here
Hey,
you go.
that is a lot of faith right
Here
there.
you go. You
And
open
might
up the
not get a
thing.
ring back. And might not get a ring back
Come on now.
nowadays.
You had to go.
Come on.
You got to go see Judge Wapner. So
Just try to get it back.
Oh my
That's
Good
God.
luck with that one.
and you end up paying everyone's bill. Well, let me go on because y'all trying to distract me. I ain't gonna let you.
Oh, man.
So it takes faith to go through that whole process. Guess what? She says yes. Now the trust is being built more and more and more. I went through that process. I broke both. I broke the trust and the faith.
Mercy.
And I ended up in divorced. But glory be to God.
Come on.
He said, go back to your first love, which is me.
Wow.
Vertical. And then horizontally,
Come on, man.
go get your first wife and renew, reestablish, confirm,
restore.
Go through a restoration process and go get your first love. So my faith now is stronger. I know they moved a mountain, but that was my mountain. Huh? That was my mountain. So guess what? Those who are listening out there, you can make a mistake, you can lose your faith, and you can reduce your trust. Just say, hey man, if I can do it, first, my fault. If God can do it for me and through my life, glory be to God. Man. He can do it for you. So, faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. Holla at your boy, Paul.
That reminds me of the sermon from the man of God today, where because I was watching the quarantine revival, man. Michael Polite was that what it was? Yeah. Hey, that brother brought fire. I was so high after the sermon. I was like, when are we gonna land this plane? Because I was in the stratosphere.
Come on.
But he was talking about Peter. And Peter was the one that said that, Lord, I will never let you down. I will never deny you. That's not me. Peter said that he was a G. Peter was the one that was walking on the water. Peter was the one, if you remember, in the garden, when they came and they seized Jesus, Peter was the one that pulled out the sword. And when Peter tried to chop, you think that he meant to chop off an ear? No, Peter meant to chop off more than that. So here is somebody who was what we call today a real one. He was a real one. But before the cock crowed, what happened?
He did exactly what Jesus said.
Jesus told him that he would never deny him. He said, Simon. He didn't even call him Peter. He called him Simon because he wanted to remind Simon Peter
about his mama name.
Yeah, where you come from? Where it calls you by your name. So he says Simon. And he tells Simon that before the cock crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. That's a coward way out, right? Here's somebody who was a straight up G. He cuts off the ear and everything. He as a matter of fact, he's the only one that came to Jesus' aid when that thing was going to. Matthew didn't. John the Beloved didn't. Luke didn't. None of them dudes did. The only one that came was Peter. All right. So the thing is, and this is the beautiful thing about Jesus. Remember when I told you that God is always going to be faithful on his end.
That's right.
All right. So even though Peter denied Christ 3 times, I got to get in the camera, 3 times. Even though he denied him 3 times. 3 times. Because I think the minister said tonight that there are reasons why we're angry. There are reasons why and one of the reasons or the reason why you're angry. I can't remember, but the reason why you're disappointed is because of unmet expectations.
Come on.
But because of the fact that because of the fact that God has already been here and already knew that you were going to come there at some point, because of the fact that you did not disappoint him, because you did exactly what he expected you to do. And so he wasn't even disappointed that Peter had denied him 3 times. Peter was disappointed with himself that he denied him 3 times. Jesus still loved him even though he denied him 3 times. God is always going to be faithful on his end. He just needs us to be faithful on our end. All right.
Now,
and then we
that's a good
build that
segue.
relationship. Did I hear somebody?
Okay, so watch this. That's a good segue to this. What's a good first step? Because we have a lot of people who are not where you are. You know, I ask this question often, or I say this often on our broadcast. Everybody's not at the level that we are. So how do you get to our level? I want everybody to go through, if you would, and give a first step. What's a first step to developing a faith that eventually will lead to the mustard seed comparison?
Well, if Terrence, if you
somebody's
want to go,
asking,
I'll go after you, Terrence. If you want to go.
I mean, I was going to be quick. I was just going to say, first of all, you just got to take that first step toward him. Take that first step toward him, and then allow yourself to have an experience with God. You're never going to know this until you have an experience with God. It's absolutely necessary to have an experience with God to truly understand what the 4 of us are talking about from our positions, from our perspectives, in terms of, that faith of a mustard seed. You got to have that experience. There's no other way than to have an experience with God. Otherwise, I mean, you just talking, and that's it, and that's all. But you got to have that experience with God.
Okay, so a good first step then, even before that, might be what? To just explore some of the teachings that he's giving us in the Bible. So the preliminary first step is, hey, there's this book that he wrote. It's got a lot of good advice and tips for how to lead a successful life, full of joy, full of peace, with safety and all these other wonderful things. So as a good first step, would you say is, hey, go ahead, take that book and start reading it and see what he says. Try doing a few things that he says to do.
Exactly. I would say it like this, Stan. When we were kids, we used to play this game called Truth or Dare.
Come on, don't take me back now.
Dare God to show up in your life and watch what happens. I've done it, so I'm not sitting here just talking. But dare God to show up in your life. And again, if you were watching last week, I 12 years as a Muslim. So for a while, I had left Christianity. It got to a point where I dared God to show up in my life, and when He did, woo! But
come on,
nothing.
Okay, I gotta put this one. We gotta post this one on the board right here, because that one's powerful. So you basically saying, listen, dare challenge God to reveal Himself, and you're saying that you have personal experience in the matter.
Yes, sir.
That's a great challenge right there. If you don't know God, gotcha. So if you don't know God, if you're listening and you don't know God and you don't have faith, but you're exploring this whole new thing with God, you want to get to know Him, and you're trying to learn how to be on His team, one of the first things you can do is talk to Him, to yourself, and talk in your head. He can hear you. That's what we're telling you from our own experiences. He can hear you. You don't have to talk out loud. You can talk in your head, right? And ask Him, dare Him even to reveal Himself to you. And you're saying He'll do it. I concur. He will. He'll do it in such a way. Come on. come on, Doc.
Hey, Terrence said it, and I don't want to repeat, but I just have to say this, and from my perspective, in sequence. First, pray. 1, 2. While praying, you're establishing the dialogue, the communication. Then you go to His Word, and read the book of books. Then step 3 is hang around people that know him, that read the same book you read, and let them talk and share this experience of faith. That helps build yours. Terrence had a testimony last week, and right after his testimony, I texted him. I said, man, we have to talk. But since he's big dog and all, he hadn't got back with me, but that's a whole new subject. For one thing, that a lady came to Terrence, knocked on the door, said, in 1 year, you're going to be in a different frame of mind, and you're going to be rolling in a certain area. And Terrence said, no, but in 1 year it happened. So it was a powerful story. His quote unquote, he had a different name, but his pastor or minister, he said to him when he saw him at the grocery store, man, we keep meeting in the same spot. What's going on here? That's God moving and navigating in his life. Let me just pause by and say this. I know this sounds so generic, sounds so religious, but what we're talking about is not an easy task, because that's why this text comes in. You can have a form of godliness and deny the power of. There's a lot of people have a form. Just like there was a minister 3 weeks ago that chose not to close his church down because of COVID-19, and now he's dead because he was disobedient. I'm gonna pass the baton on that.
Okay. I got to do this. Oh, go ahead, Paul. I'll let you
I was going to say, and you and I, we've been connected with youth ministries for a number of years. We take young people there to Wawona in Yosemite. And over the years, man, we have heard some really incredible testimonies from some of these young people, from being in places where they had no business being, and someone was getting ready to shoot them point blank right there in their face.
I remember that.
And the gun jammed. The guy fixed the gun. Click, click. Tried to do it again, and the gun jammed. You know what I'm saying?
Come on,
a young brother from Fresno had been shot some 9 times, mistaken identity 9 times, almost bled out. All right. And he said that, you know what, Lord, if you can pull me through this,
come on now,
I will serve you for the rest of my life. And I don't know if that, but like I said, God did his part.
Yes. Come on.
Right. And sometimes we're not faithful to do our part.
That's right.
But I know that God pulled him through. All right. And he gave this testimony that was just incredible. And that's some of the things that you get when you go to Wawona. I have my own testimony, but I'll pass. I'll let Stan go ahead and say what he was going to say.
Now, what I was going to do is I was going to address one of the comments that came in tonight by Alana Wallace. She has 2. I'm going to let someone else address the second one, but the first one, let me throw that up there again so you can see it. So it is this: everyone has an experience, but not everyone recognizes that it was God. That's a very good question, statement, expression to make. And that is, how do you know when it is God? For those which we just we made an assertion or we made a suggestion that someone challenges, or that people challenge or dares God to reveal himself. And so this is a response to that. And that is, but everyone may not recognize his voice. Now watch this. So here, let me respond to this.
Come on.
And this is something, this is something that I have experienced personally, and I have heard others share similar experiences. And it goes like this. God is so powerful. I got to go deep real quick. So I'm going to take my time and go slow, but I'm not going to be long. And it goes like this. First of all, I'm confident that anyone in a case like this, where God has to make his first introduction. And so I'm not talking about individuals who have been coming to church. They've been on his side of the fence for a while. Then they get on it and straddle it, and then they leave. You know, they kind of had a relationship they began, and they waffle. Okay, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about right now, for the most part, those who are getting really their first introduction to God. For anyone who does that, I can say emphatically this: that if you challenge God to reveal himself to you so that you will know that it's him who's trying to let you know that, yes, I exist, and yes, that was me, he will do it. And he'll do it in such a way that you will not be able to attribute the thing that just happened, this thing that just happened, to anything else. Chance, someone else, your mind playing tricks on you. You won't be able to attribute it to any of those things. And here's why, because there's something powerful about the way God works and the way his spirit works when he speaks to you. And I know that gets kind of confusing too. Let me just kind of make it sound as though God is one at the moment when they really are three. When God speaks to you, when he's working on revealing himself to you, here's an example of how it will go. In your head, you'll say, God, okay, I'm not really sure whether you exist. Can you help me out? If you really do exist, can you do something to show me? Okay, so day one, that's the conversation you have. Okay. Day one, you'll have that conversation and you'll say those words in your head. And you know how in your mind, you speak in your mind and then you stop. And then there are other thoughts that follow, but that really wasn't you speaking. You weren't really trying to speak those words in your head, but they just kind of flowed out afterwards. God will take advantage of that. Okay. He'll have you'll say something in your head. And then when you stop and you're done, the words will keep going as though you're continuing to talk, but it's not you. And what will be revealed in that is an idea. Hey, well, you suggested that I show you this way. Well, why don't you show me this way? And you'll say to yourself, okay, that's a pretty good thought. Maybe I should have said that. That was actually God who was planning that in your head. Now watch this. When he does answer you, he'll answer you not with what you said in your head, but what was asked that followed, which wasn't you, remember? But it was what you heard. And when that happens, you'll say to yourself, how can I get an answer to something? And it wasn't really what I challenged him to do, but it was a challenge that I heard in my head. It just really wasn't me who said that. I hope I'm not losing anyone, but if you can just grab a hold of this, that God will speak things in your head that did not originate with you. And then he may answer you exactly the way you asked him to do it, or he may do it the way it was posed by that other voice, or he may do both. But what I can tell you is that when he is done, that's just day one. There will be a day two and a day three. He will make him. He's gonna do something that at the end of this test, this examination that you subject him to, you're going to say, it can only be someone who can read my thoughts. And no, it can't be explained by anything else or anyone else. No one can get in my head. And I didn't share that with anyone. I tell you, Lana, and I know you may have been speaking on behalf of some others, those who may be listening. If you challenge God, I can tell you emphatically, for that very first encounter that you have, where you need to get past the doubt of whether he exists, he will reveal himself in a way with flying colors that you just won't be able to deny that he exists. Now, with that said, watch this. I don't know, any remarks on that? And I'm going to throw up Lana's second remark, and I see we have a few more. Come on. I think Paul was next.
I'll say this, man. Sometimes, well, let's put it like this. You may not believe that it's God that's speaking to you, but if it was something that was so profound in your life that you never forgot it, somewhere down the line, you'll come to a venue such as this right here, where we're talking right now, and it will spark that memory, you know.
Ooh, yeah, he does that too.
Yeah, it'll spark that memory of that thing that was so profound in your life that you couldn't explain it. All right. You may have forgotten about it, but now, right now, while we're talking about faith, and right now, while we're talking about God talking to you and God doing things in your life, you're like, man. So I wonder if, you know, this was God doing something in my life. If that was God that did that, you know, man, forget that. And you keep on moving on in your life. But God has this way of not leaving you alone, not
leaving you
letting
hanging.
it go. You know what I'm saying? And that thing that happened in your life is one of those things that just nags at you. You know, you probably told the story before about how the gun was pulled and the gun jammed. And then he racked around, got rid of the casing, racked another round, and tried to do it again, and the gun jammed. That's something that's very profound in your life. You're never going to forget it. You know, if you've ever looked down the barrel of a gun while it's while it's in your face, you're not going to forget that too easily.
Nah,
and then
never.
You probably said this, you know, to this venue, but you'll probably come towards something again. You probably will, you know, I don't know, end up going to prison, end up listening to some crazy chaplain who's telling you that God speaks to you in profound ways. You're like, man, this thing is just not going to leave me alone, is it?
Right.
And then it's at that point, man, that you decide that maybe it was this God that they're talking about. And so that piques your interest. You begin to start coming to these things more often, and you begin to see that not only was it that thing that God may have pulled you through, but there were other things that God may have pulled you through, and you become to start building that relationship again, where God is faithful. And if you are faithful, then God is going to use you, and that relationship, that bond starts getting strong again. And so I'll pass the baton on that.
Yeah. Real quick, Terrence, before you go, I was just going to say this. That you just said, Paul, that continues to happen to me. I'm a believer already. Sometimes I'll argue that I don't need reinforcement. The truth is that I still do need him to every now and then just continually remind me that he exists, because my humanity will take over at times, and you begin to grow doubtful if you don't keep a steady flow, some maintenance. But he continues as long as I've been in this relationship with him and on this walk with him. He still reminds me of stuff from back in the day. So I just had to concur, bro. Come on, Terrence.
No, I just wanted to say, you know, since we've kind of transitioned into God speaking to us, particularly trying to be mindful of a new believer in walking and trying to hear God speak to you. You have to be mindful that while you're walking, not to close your eyes, because a lot of times what God will do is he will speak to your circumstances, speak to your situation before he actually speaks to you, right? And so the evidence is all around you when you can see how, as Paul was talking about earlier, you know, I mean, praise God, an individual was shot 9 times, almost bled out, and the Lord pulled them through. Now, I don't know, and I pray that he is or she is, whoever that was, you know, still walking with God. But man, something like that, that's undeniable. But it's a way of God communicating with us, saying, hey, I heard your prayer, right?
Yeah.
Not only did I hear your prayer, I honored your prayer. Right? And so, again, just as Paul said, God does his thing. He holds up his end of the bargain. So the question is, will we hold up ours?
That's
and
right.
So we're back to that relationship part again, right? Where it's not about bargaining with God. It's not about a bartering system with God so much as it is God knows what each of us individually, uniquely need right, in order to worship him and to have relationship with him. And so he's so much love that he's willing to do that for us, right? But at the same time, we have to do our part in keeping that relationship going and feeding that faith, right?
Yeah.
By building trust and building that relationship. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that one out there, that it's not all the time that God will, and praise God that he has. I know he's spoken to me, but it's not always going to be audible. It's not even necessarily all the time something that he will plant in your head, although that he will do that. But sometimes you got to have your eyes open so that you can see your circumstances changing around you.
Right.
You know what? That's a good segue. And watch this. I'm gonna post this, Chris. I'm gonna give you the last lengthy response. Would you mind combine what you were gonna say and also address this here? Because what Lana just posed is a valid a valid situation to consider, and that is not every. She's saying that a person has to first develop a thirst. So she's kind of considering, hey, before people even get to the point where they can get or desire faith size of a mustard seed, they need to first have a thirst for God in general. And so is there anything that you can,
Sure. So I want to add another component, and that is sometimes we may not be here, God, but God will use another person to come tell us. See, sometimes we dreams, he can give it to us in dreams, and then someone can come and solidify the dream. You guys, hey, I dreamed about that last night. So sometimes God, I'll put it this way, God can use any source that he needs to use to get your attention.
Yes, I believe it.
My sister talked about being thirsty. Sometimes you don't have to be thirsty. God can come to you. There's sometimes you have to have a willing spirit. Being thirsty is good. Having the desire to know about God. As the old song said, it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. I'm thirsty. I want to hear a word from you, Lord. Please help me. Show me the way. Lead and guide me to all truth. I'm going to give my final thought, and I'm going to focus on the first cousin, which is the trust. The world right now is lacking the ability to trust each other. And that's why the COVID-19 will keep extending because of this one word. As the Christian world says, faith of a mustard seed, the world says, I don't trust you. So God can't trust you with anything if you don't trust him with everything. And tonight, we want to leave with you, trust God with everything, with all your heart, and lean not into your own understanding. In all thy ways, acknowledge him. Guess what? And he shall and he will direct your path. I'll pass the baton.
I like that. I'll take this last one right here before I give everyone just a quick final thought as we wrap up. And that is, she says, I think all points are valid for someone who's already seeking answers, wandering, searching, but there are people who are just close to the idea of God. And you know what? You are absolutely right. And I believe that that's one, I'm going to answer you with this right here. I believe that that is the reason for the Reclamation Project. The Reclamation Project is a place for people who not only are not where we are in our walk, but they just really may not be receptive to the idea of God, such that they would want to even come here. Okay, so that's number one. I was on a thread earlier today with someone who had some things to say about tomorrow's presentation. Many religions, but science only validates one. And so tomorrow we're going to be talking about the 5 major religions and how science actually validates one of those 5 major religions: Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, and Islam. Okay. And this guy had a question about whether or not that could actually be done. And in my response, I attempted to be gentle. So first of all, we're talking to a person, as Lana's suggesting, who's not not really receptive to the things that we're talking about of faith, but they're not even really receptive to the idea of God.
Right.
But the reason why they responded was because they had an ad come on their wall. And so they decided to respond to it there. But when I but when I responded to them, as I often do, I made sure that I did so lovingly, because I understand where they are, why many non-believers are where they are. So I responded to them lovingly, and watch this. After I said what I said, he told me that you've piqued my interest, because I told him about the Reclamation Project and what we're about and why we're here. So now let me come back to Lana and this remark that she made, which I believe it characterized a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay. And that is that you're right. This conversation really isn't aimed at the non-believer. Tonight's conversation is about the one who already has some degree of belief in God and is wanting to start out on this journey, but faith, they're just not there with that, and they're still wrestling with this idea. But the Reclamation Project is going to get, we're going to do our best to get to every population. We want to address the needs of people who believe already. And most certainly the reason why we started was for people who don't believe at all. Why would they even be interested? Why would they even be interested in this? Well, I know that for many of them, and I'm coming to a close before I pass the baton. I know for many of them, even though they say they don't believe in God and they don't care about being a part of your club, they still have questions that they want answered about God. They want some clarity. They're seeking clarity, like so many of us do, about all sorts of subject matter. And so we are here. The Reclamation Project is here to do our best to offer clarity. And we hope that we can, as in the words of this gentleman, will pique the interest of many more to want to come back and see what more do you have to say. Maybe I can give this another chance. So I'll pass the baton. Terrence, and we'll go ahead and give our final thoughts, everybody.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments that our sister Lana put out there, because they're very, very valid. What I want to respond to was where she was describing how some folks don't have a thirst for God, right? And so what I want to respond to that with was, I read that Steve Jobs once said that people don't know what they want until you tell them. How do I tie that in? I didn't realize just how thirsty for God I was until he told me. Right? It wasn't me in and of myself that said, you know what, I have a thirst for God. But it was God using the Holy Spirit to speak to me and get my attention. And subtly, but surely, that happened. And I believe even for the non-believer, because again, you know, at one point I wasn't feeling nothing about a Jesus Christ. Nothing about a Jesus Christ, right? But God did what he had to do, and we got to keep in mind, we serve an exceptional God, right? The things that we can't even fathom are the things he performs just on the whim, right? So this is the God we serve, an exceptional God. So I believe that for each and every person that's out there that may not feel that they have this thirst for God, or that they're looking for God, he has a certain way to package himself, right, to draw them unto him just as well. I'll pass the baton.
I guess my final thoughts would be, keep being thirsty for Jesus.
Yes.
And keep your lights lit for someone that's in darkness. They can find light through you. I pass.
Yeah, when we talk about those individuals that may not have a desire to hear anything about God whatsoever, I agree with Stan when he says, but they may still have questions. They may still have questions. the point that I'm making, it was very difficult for me to not say, because in my mind, I was saying this, that everybody ain't gonna be saved. That in my mind, that's what I was saying, and I just verbalized it. But the point that I want to make is that it shouldn't really matter to us whether a person is closed. We are still called to give the good news. All right. And I like the fact that Stan was very, what was the word, where he noticed, or that he realized that where this person might be would have to be handled a different way than someone who may have grown up knowing something about God, but decided that, you know what, man, I'm out of here. I'm doing my own thing and stuff like that. That person has a knowledge of God. They just don't want to hear nothing about it. Aside from the person who may have grown up in a household that didn't teach anything about God, or maybe got to a point to where, hey, the Bible says that man's wisdom is God's foolishness. Sometimes you're too smart for your own good, and sometimes you've got too much education, and you're willing to go on that education and more than you are willing to go on anything that God might have to say. But you still have questions, and you can still be educated. And so, with that, I'll pass the baton.
Yes. Nice. Well, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and just summarize for everyone what we went through today. And where's my mouse here? So first, my brothers mentioned God must get the glory. So again, we're talking about faith and how do you get it, or how do you get this mustard seed faith? God must get the glory. Keep your eyes on Jesus.
Stay focused.
Faith develops with the growth of your relationship. The next one I want to share, I was listening to this brother who gave an awesome devotional. His name was, what's his name? Alan Parr. And he has a show on YouTube called The Beat. And I like what he said. I concur. The first thing he said was, remember God's past faithfulness. Okay. Yes. Now, this is kind of for the person who's already been with God for just a little bit, perhaps. But when you remember how he's been faithful to you before, one of the ways that, and this is a tool for you. One of the tools you can use for strengthening and increasing your faith is remembering how he was faithful to you in the past. Another thing is to reject the thinking of negative people. And I love what he did. He gave the example of the children of Israel after they had left Egypt and they were close to crossing over into Canaan land. And the men were sent out to go and survey the land. And we know the story, or perhaps most of us know the story. Some came back with a good report. Some came back with a bad report.
Caleb and Joshua.
What this brother Alan Parr was saying was, you need to reject the thinking of the people who were spreading the rumors of the ones who brought back the negative report. And finally, which is so important, because I know we recognize that, just a non-religious environment or circumstance, you get around negative people, it starts to weigh on you, so keep it moving, get away from them. And the final thing was recognize God's power, which I thought was powerful. This is another thing that he said, and that was Joshua and Caleb reminded the people that, hey, forget about that negative report. God said he would do this. God said he would do that. And if he said that he'll do it, he will do it. So recognize God.
Come on, man.
Come on, give it to me. I
let him go. Let him go. Come on, Paul.
God said that he would do this. God said that he would do that. So what I was waiting on you to say is that God is going to do this.
There it
There's
is.
only one part. There's only one part.
Come on,
My
man.
fault. I'm gonna be ready for next time. My fault. I missed that one today. I dropped the ball. But no doubt, recognize God's power that He will do what He said He will do. And so, with that said, I just want to say, hey, thank you guys for coming back tonight and doing our thing. We appreciate it. Thank you guys for tuning in. And tomorrow we've got a I think an interesting, to say the least, topic that we're going to discuss at 1 p.m. on this broadcast, same place, same channel, and that is many religions, but science only validates one. I think there's some powerful information that will help increase your faith as well. And so, with that said, the depths of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable are His judgments and how unfathomable His ways. For from Him and through Him and to Him are all things. To Him be glory forever. Amen. My brothers,
Amen.
good to see you. You guys have a good night.
All right.
Yes.
You too.
And yes, we'll see you next time.
All right. Peace.
So I might serve.